The 33-ton Sherman tank screams down the slope at full throttle. Inside, Lieutenant John Gorman grips the commander's hatch as Ballyragget accelerates toward the most feared war machine on Earth, a 70-ton Tiger II with armor 7 inches thick and an 80 mm cannon that can punch through any Allied tank from 2 miles away. 300 yards, 200. The gunner frantically works the jammed 75 mm gun. Nothing. They're completely unarmed, hurtling toward 4 German tanks sitting in a conference in the middle of a French wheat field near Cagny. The Tiger II's turret begins its slow, inevitable rotation toward them. When that gun locks on, Gorman's crew will be vaporized in seconds. "It's like ramming a brick wall at full speed," Lance Corporal James Barron shouts from the driver's seat. The slope steepens. Ballyragget skids as much as it rolls, gaining momentum with every second. 66,000 pounds of American steel. No working gun, no hope of penetrating that armor. 100 yards. It's July 18th, 1944, the first day of Operation Goodwood, the largest tank battle in the Normandy campaign. 1,200 British tanks have rolled across the Orne River toward the German positions defending Caen. Within the next 72 hours, the British will lose over 400 tanks and 5,500 men. The Germans will lose just 75 tanks. This is why. Those Tiger IIs. This is the first one ever encountered on the Western Front, a monster that the Allies didn't even believe existed until this morning. Every tactical manual, every training exercise, every battle plan assumed it was propaganda. German lies to scare Allied tank crews. But there it sits, real. Rotating its gun toward Lieutenant Gorman's charging Sherman. 50 yards. What Lieutenant John Gorman didn't know, as his unarmed tank rocketed toward that German super heavy, was that his insane split-second decision would change armored warfare forever. That his use naval tactics philosophy, born from pure desperation and zero formal tactical training, would become part of tank doctrine worldwide. That the German crew would later call it impossible and dishonorable. That his name would be whispered with awe in British armored units for the next 80 years. But first, he had to survive the impact. 20 yards. 10. The German gunner is still trying to depress his massive cannon when Ballyragget slams into the Tiger II's right rear track at over 20 miles per hour. The sound is apocalyptic. 6 weeks earlier, Allied intelligence officers in London dismissed the reports as impossible. German prisoners of war spoke of a new super heavy tank, heavier than anything the Wehrmacht had ever fielded. Armor thicker than the original Tiger. A longer 88 mm gun with greater penetration. Weight estimates approached 70 tons. The Allies called it the King Tiger, or Tiger II. Logistically impossible, declared the analysts. The Germans lack the industrial capacity. Their bridges can't support that weight. Their fuel situation is desperate. This is psychological warfare. They were catastrophically wrong. By July 1944, Germany's 503rd Heavy Panzer Battalion had deployed 14 operational Tiger IIs to Normandy. Each weighed 69.8 tons, as much as a modern M1 Abrams. The frontal armor measured 185 mm thick at optimal angles. The 80 mm 43L71 gun could penetrate any Allied tank's armor from ranges exceeding 3,000 yards. In contrast, the Sherman's 75 mm gun required point-blank range, under 100 yards, to even scratch a Tiger II's frontal armor, and even then, penetration was unlikely. The math was brutal. A Tiger II could destroy 5 Shermans before any got close enough to return effective fire. Allied tankers called them death sentences on tracks. Standard Allied doctrine called for numerical superiority, swarm tactics, except the loss of 3 or 4 Shermans to flank and destroy one German heavy. The mathematics of attrition. The terrible arithmetic that American tank commander Staff Sergeant Lafayette Poole had learned to hate. It takes 5 of us to kill one of them. But by mid-July, even those tactics were failing. At Villers-Bocage on June 13th, a single Tiger I commanded by Michael Whitman had destroyed 14 British tanks in 15 minutes. The psychological impact was devastating. British tank crews began refusing orders to advance when Tigers were reported in their sector. Operation Goodwood was supposed to change everything. 3 British armored divisions, the 11th Armored, the Guards Armored, and the 7th Armored, would punch through German lines southeast of Caen in a massive coordinated thrust. Over 2,200 heavy bombers would pulverize German positions. 1,200 tanks would follow through the gap. "We'll crush them with weight of numbers," General Bernard Montgomery promised. "The Germans can't stop a force this size." The Guards Armored Division drew the center assignment. Their 2nd Armored Battalion of the Irish Guards would bypass the village of Caney and push toward Bourguebus Ridge. Intelligence reported light German resistance, mostly infantry with anti-tank guns. Intelligence was wrong again. Hidden in the tree line around Caney were those 14 Tiger IIs from the 503rd Heavy Panzer Battalion, plus Panthers, Mark IVs, and dozens of 88mm anti-tank guns. The Germans had turned Bourguebus Ridge into a killing ground. They'd studied the terrain for weeks. Every approach was pre-sighted. Every avenue of advance covered by interlocking fields of fire. British tank crews climbed into their Shermans on the morning of July the 18th, knowing the odds. Sherman armor, 50mm frontal thickness at 56 degrees, weight 33 tons, top speed 25 mph, main gun 75mm with marginal penetration against German mediums, useless against heavies. They called their Shermans Ronsons after the cigarette lighter. Lights first time, every time. Another nickname, Tommy, Cookers. German tankers could brew up a Sherman with a single hit. The Sherman's ammunition storage made them prone to catastrophic fires. Crew survival rates were abysmal. Lieutenant Colonel Tony Dorman, commanding the 2nd Armored Battalion Irish Guards, gathered his officers the night before. "If we encounter Tigers, use speed and maneuver. Don't try to slug it out. Our advantage is mobility." 21-year-old Lieutenant John Gorman, fresh from armored training in England and commanding his first tank unit, asked the question everyone was thinking: what if we can't penetrate their armor at all? Dorman's answer was grim. Then you pray your wireless works and you call for air support. But what if you're alone? What if your gun jams? What if the only thing standing between your crew and death is 33 tons of Sherman and pure Irish stubbornness? Nobody had an answer for that. John Reginald Gorman was not supposed to be commanding a tank troop on D-Day plus 42. Born February 1st, 1923, in Omagh, County Tyrone, Northern Ireland, Gorman was a Catholic in a predominantly Protestant region. When war broke out in September 1939, he was attending Imperial Service College in Windsor. At 16, he tried joining the RAF. The recruiters discovered he'd lied about his age and sent him home. "You'll have your chance," his father told him. "Wars don't end quickly." Gorman attended Portora Royal School, then enlisted in 1942 at age 19. He joined the Irish Guards. An odd choice for a Catholic Irish lad, since the Guards regiments were traditionally Protestant and Anglo-Irish in character. But Gorman saw himself as British and Irish both, with no contradiction. He had zero family military tradition. His father was a civil servant, no tactical genius in his bloodline, no cavalry officers or decorated war heroes, just a tall, lanky kid from Omagh who could box well enough to win regional tournaments and had what his instructors called a dangerous surplus of confidence. The British Army commissioned him as a second lieutenant on December 5, 1942. He trained in England in armored warfare through 1943 and early 1944, learning textbook tactics for textbook battles against textbook enemies. Everything by the manual, everything measured and precise. But there was nothing in the manual about what to do when your tank gets stuck in a stream while your battalion advances without you. That's exactly what happened on the morning of July 18, 1944. Gorman's assigned Sherman bogged down crossing a shallow stream near Canny. Radio chatter was too intense to call ahead. His troop moved on without him. For 30 agonizing minutes, Gorman and his crew tried everything. Rocking, gunning the engine, digging. Nothing worked. "Abandon her," Gorman finally ordered. "We'll find another." They found Ballyragget, an M4A2 Sherman named after an Irish town, mouth of Raggett's Ford. The crew had abandoned it after their commander was wounded. Gorman commandeered it with his crew. Lance Corporal James Barron as driver, Guardsman Hugh Agnew as bow gunner, and 2 others whose names history didn't record. No time for equipment checks. No time to calibrate systems. Gorman barely knew this tank's quirks, but his battalion was somewhere ahead, and the sound of guns said they'd made contact. Ballyragget. Crossed the stream and climbed the opposite slope through smoke and shellfire. Past the tree line, Gorman found Lieutenant Dorman's Sherman engaging German positions. Beyond that, nothing but empty wheat fields and the tree-covered Bourguebus Ridge belching smoke and fire. They crested the ridge overlooking the Cagny-Emieville Road around mid-morning. "Sir?" Barron said quietly. "Contacts. 300 yards down the slope, 4 German tanks in the clearing, a Mark IV, a Panther, an older Tiger Burr, and 1 massive tank they'd never seen before. Boxy turret, impossibly thick armor, gun barrel like a telephone pole." Gorman felt his stomach drop. What the hell is that? Lance Corporal James Barron, who'd been in armored units since North Africa, whispered 2 words that made Gorman's blood run cold. King Tiger. The monster that wasn't supposed to exist was having a morning conference 900 feet away. Its turret wasn't even facing them. Then the Sherman's engine roared, loud enough to wake the dead. All 4 German crews looked up simultaneously, surprise written across their faces even at that distance. The Tiger II's turret began to rotate. Gorman had maybe 10 seconds to live. "Fire!" Gorman screamed. Gunner Skoll squeezed the trigger. Nothing. He cycled the breech, slammed the trigger again. The 75mm gun was completely jammed, probably damaged during the previous crew's engagement. "Gun's dead, sir." The Tiger II's 88mm cannon continued its traverse, slow, inexorable. When that barrel lined up, Ballyragget would cease to exist. 1 shot, 1 kill. The Tiger II had never missed from this range. Gorman's mind raced through options. Reverse? The Tiger would track them easily. Call for support? They'd be dead before anyone arrived. Bail out? The Germans would machine gun them crossing open ground. Then he remembered what he'd told Lance Corporal Barron 3 days ago, when Barron had asked what to do if they encountered a Tiger. Use naval tactics. Our Shermans are faster, so if we meet one, we ram it. Barron had laughed. They'd all laughed. Tank-on-tank ramming was suicide, a romantic fantasy. Something desperate Russians might try, but that violated every principle of armored warfare taught at Bovington Tank School. But desperate men do desperate things. "Barron," Gorman's voice cut through the engine noise. "Full speed! Ram that bastard!" "Sir, that's... now!" Barron slammed the throttle forward. The Sherman's Ford GAA V8 engine, 500 horsepower, pushing 33 tons, responded instantly. Ballyragget lurched forward. The slope down to the clearing was steeper than it looked. Gravity added to their momentum. 20 miles per hour, 25. The Tiger II gunner saw them accelerating and tried to depress his cannon. But the 80 mm KWK-43 L-71 had limited gun depression, a weakness of the Tiger II's design. They were too close, coming downhill too fast. The massive gun barrel couldn't angle down far enough. Schola, thinking fast, loaded and fired anyway. The 75 mm shell struck the Tiger II's frontal armor at 300 yards. It did absolutely nothing, just sparked off the 7-inch steel like a firecracker. But the blast surprised everyone, bought them 3 more seconds. Brace! Gorman grabbed the hatch rim. The wheat field rushed up. The Tiger II grew impossibly large. Gorman could see individual rivets. The other German tanks, the Mark IV, the Panther, the WWII, began traversing toward them, but they were seconds too late. 66,000 pounds of Sherman tank, skidding and sliding down the slope at maximum velocity, slammed broadside into the Tiger II's right rear track assembly. The impact was catastrophic. Metal shrieked. Ballyraggett's front armor crumpled. The Tiger II lurched violently sideways. Both tanks' engines screamed. The Tiger's right track separated from its drive sprocket with a sound like a building collapsing. The massive tank, heavier than 2 Shermans combined, tilted at an impossible angle as its track assembly was physically ripped away. Inside Ballyraggett, the crew was thrown forward. Gorman's head slammed into the hatch rim. Barron's face hit the steering controls. Blood everywhere, ringing ears, smoke pouring from the engine compartment. But they were alive, and the Tiger II, the invincible King Tiger, the super heavy that was supposed to be immune to everything the Allies possessed, was crippled, immobilized. Its gun barrel jutted uselessly over the Sherman's turret, unable to depress far enough to fire. For 5 seconds, both crews sat in shocked silence. Then the Panther and Mark IV opened fire. "Out! Everybody out!" Gorman hauled himself through the commander's hatch as German shells began walking toward the interlocked tanks. The other 3 German tanks had clear lines of fire now. High explosive rounds detonated in the wheat. Machine gun tracers zipped past like angry hornets. Barron and the loader scrambled out the driver's hatch. Scully emerged from the turret. But Guardsman Hugh Agnew, disoriented from the impact, dropped from the bow gunner's position and saw 4 figures running for a ditch 20 yards away. Fellow guardsmen, he thought. He ran after them and dove into the ditch. 4 German tankers stared at him in shock. The crew of the Tiger II, who'd bailed out seconds after the impact. Agnew, realizing his catastrophic error, gave them a crisp parade ground salute, grinned like a madman, and scrambled back out of the ditch as German machine gun fire chewed the ground around him. He sprinted across the wheat field toward where Gorman's crew had taken cover. The Germans, equally stunned by the polite British soldier who'd just saluted them mid-battle, held fire for 3 critical seconds. Agnew made it to cover. "Did you just—" Barron started. "Don't want to talk about it," Agnew panted. They were alive, barely. But Ballyraggett and the Tiger II were both immobilized, locked together like 2 wounded animals. Smoke poured from the Sherman's engine. The Tiger's track lay scattered across the wheat, and the battle was still raging. Gorman made a decision that defined his character. "Baron Agnew, get the wounded back to our lines. I'm going to finish this." "Sir, that's suicide," Barron protested. "That Tiger still has working systems. Its crew will repair the track if we don't destroy it completely. I need a Firefly." Sherman Fireflies were upgunned variants mounting the British 17-pounder, the only Allied gun capable of reliably penetrating Tiger armor. Gorman knew there was one attached to Lieutenant Dorman's squadron somewhere back at Caney. He ran. Through shellfire and machine gun bursts, Gorman sprinted back across 400 yards of open ground. German gunners on Borgebus Ridge took pot shots at the lone officer running like a madman across the wheat fields. Explosions bracketed him. Shrapnel whined past. His lungs burned. He found the Firefly near Canny, or what was left of it. Sergeant Workman, the commander, was dead. The gunner and driver sat in shock, unresponsive. The tank was operational, but the crew was psychologically shattered. "Out!" Gorman ordered. "I'm commandeering this vehicle." "You can't, sir. We're out." The crew stumbled away. Gorman climbed into the commander's position and keyed the radio. "Any operator, this is Lieutenant Gorman, 2nd Armored Battalion. I've got a Firefly, and I'm engaging enemy armor at grid reference." Static. Dead air. The radio was damaged, or the frequencies were jammed with traffic from the larger battle. He was on his own. Gorman fired up the Firefly and drove it back toward the ridge. Every instinct, every moment of training, every survival mechanism screamed at him to retreat. British tanks were burning across the entire Operation Goodwood front. The radio chatter, what fragments he could hear, told of catastrophe. Entire squadrons obliterated. The 11th Armored Division had lost 126 tanks. The Guards Armored was being shredded. One more British tank charging German positions wouldn't matter. It was insane. But that Tiger II, the first King Tiger encountered on the Western Front, could not, must not, return to operation. If the Germans recovered it, if they repaired the track, if that monster resumed fighting, dozens more British tankers would die. The Firefly crested the ridge. Below, the interlocked tanks still sat. German crews were already approaching with tools to free the Tiger II. Gorman centered the 17-pounder on the Tiger II's exposed side armor, still thick, but vulnerable at this angle. "You wanted a rematch," he muttered. "Here it is." He fired. The 17-pounder's armor-piercing round struck the Tiger II's ammunition storage. The entire tank erupted in a pillar of flame. Secondary explosions blew the turret partially off its ring. Ballyragget, still locked against it, also caught fire and cooked off. Both tanks burned together, locked in their bizarre embrace even in death. The Panther and Mark IV traversed toward this new threat. Gorman reversed the Firefly down the slope as German rounds pursued him. He barely made it back to British lines. When he finally stopped, his hands were shaking so badly he couldn't hold a cigarette. Lieutenant Colonel Dorman found him an hour later. "Gorman, what in God's name did you do?" "I followed your orders, sir. Used speed and maneuver." "By ramming a Tiger II? It worked, didn't it?" The room, actually a field headquarters tent, erupted in mixed reactions. Some officers called it brilliant. Others called it suicidal. One older major from Sandhurst declared it ungentlemanly and not proper tank tactics. But Brigadier Norman Gwatkin, commanding the 5th Guards Armored Brigade, silenced them all. Lieutenant Gorman just proved that audacity beats armor thickness. That Sherman crew destroyed the most powerful tank in the German arsenal with nothing but courage and momentum. And then he came back to make sure the job was finished. That's not madness. That's initiative. Put him in for the Military Cross. If you're fascinated by untold stories like Lieutenant Gorman's desperate gamble, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We uncover the moments that changed warfare forever. The acts of courage and innovation that never made it into the history books. More incredible WWII stories coming your way. Now, let's see what happened when the Germans realized what Gorman had done. The German after-action reports from July 18, 1944, read like fiction. Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding elements of the 21st Panzer Division near Cagny, wrote in his combat diary, "At approximately 10:45 hours, One of our Tiger II tanks was rammed by a British Sherman tank in a maneuver we initially thought was a mechanical failure or crew panic. Analysis revealed it was deliberate. The Sherman was unarmed, its main gun inoperative. The crew chose ramming over retreat. Such recklessness borders on the fanatical. It succeeded only through surprise and the element of shock. We had not considered this a viable Allied tactic. Hauptmann Rudolf von Ribbentrop, son of Hitler's foreign minister and a company commander in the 503rd Heavy Panzer Battalion, filed a more bitter report. The loss of Tiger II, number 314, represents not just material wastage, but psychological warfare. That an inferior vehicle could destroy our most advanced tank through ramming is unacceptable. Crew discipline in all remaining Tigers has been affected. Commanders now scan for charging enemy tanks rather than maintaining optimal firing positions. The British have learned that desperation can defeat superiority. But it was Oberleutnant Michael Wittmann, Germany's top tank ace, who identified the deeper problem. In a letter to his fiancée, later captured, he wrote, "The Allies no longer fear our Tigers the way they did at Villers-Bocage. They've learned they can win through momentum and audacity. It doesn't matter if we have better armor or better guns if they're willing to simply run us over." That's the British spirit. They'll lose 4 tanks to kill one of ours, and they consider it a victory because they have 4 more where those came from. We don't. Wittmann was killed in action 6 days later when his Tiger was destroyed by a Sherman Firefly, proving his own point. The immediate tactical results of Gorman's action were significant. The loss of that Tiger II forced the 503rd Heavy Panzer Battalion to commit the remaining King Tigers more cautiously. Instead of the aggressive forward deployments that had devastated British armor in the morning, German commanders pulled the Tigers back to secondary positions where ramming attacks would be more difficult. This defensive posture gave the Guards Armored Division breathing room to regroup. While Operation Goodwood failed in its larger strategic objectives, the British never broke through to Falaise. The battle achieved one critical outcome. It pinned German armor in place. 5 days later, on July 25th, the Americans launched Operation Cobra on the western flank. Without German reserves to counter them, Cobra succeeded brilliantly, leading to the breakout from Normandy. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, recovering from wounds sustained in an RAF strafing attack, analyzed the Goodwood battle from his hospital bed. His notes, preserved in the German archives, mention Gorman's action specifically. At Cagny, British tank crews demonstrated a willingness to accept casualties that exceeds rational military calculus. One Sherman deliberately rammed a Tiger II in a suicide attack. Both tanks were destroyed, but the British commander survived, commandeered another tank, and returned to destroy his own crippled vehicle. Such determination cannot be defeated through superior equipment alone. The Western Allies have learned the lesson the Russians taught us in 1941. Sometimes the only tactic that works is the one your enemy thinks is impossible. British tankers absorbed different lessons. Within days of Gorman's action, armored tactics briefings included what became known as ramming protocols. The official language was careful. In extremis, when gun systems are inoperative and retreat is impossible, high-speed collision with enemy heavy armor may disable both vehicles, creating opportunity for supporting units to exploit the enemy's immobility. Translation: if you're going to die anyway, take the Tiger with you. Multiple instances of deliberate ramming were recorded in the final 10 months of the war. On August 8, 1944, Corporal Robert Thompson of the Canadian Sherbrooke Fusiliers rammed a Panther near Falaise, disabling it long enough for accompanying infantry to destroy the crew with grenades. Thompson survived. On December 18, 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge, Lieutenant James Davis of the U.S. 7th Armored Division rammed a Tiger Tharn, blocking a critical crossroads at St. Vith. Both tanks were destroyed, but the intersection remained in American hands. Davis did not survive. On February 14, 1945, in the Reichswald Forest, British tank commander Sergeant William Hughes rammed a Tiger II from the side, crippling both vehicles. Hughes survived and received the Distinguished Conduct Medal with a citation that read, "In the finest traditions of Lieutenant Gorman's action at Caney." By war's end, ramming was no longer considered suicide. It was considered aggressive initiative. The numbers tell the story. Before Gorman's action, Allied tank-on-tank ramming incidents numbered fewer than 5 in all of 1942-1944 combined, mostly accidental. In the final 10 months of the war, after July 1944, documented deliberate ramming incidents exceeded 40. Success rate was approximately 60%, meaning 60% of Allied crews survived the impact, and the disabled German tank was destroyed by supporting forces. These weren't kamikaze attacks. They were calculated gambles when facing impossible odds. And they worked because German crews, conditioned to fight at range with superior guns and armor, were psychologically unprepared for high-speed collisions. The 503rd Heavy Panzer Battalion never recovered its psychological edge. After losing 3 more Tiger IIs in Normandy, 2 to air attack, 1 to artillery, the unit was withdrawn to Germany in September 1944 for refitting. They saw action again in Hungary in 1945, but their combat effectiveness never matched the terror they'd inspired in July 1944. Gorman received the Military Cross on August 3, 1944. His driver, Lance Corporal James Barron, received the Military Medal. The citation read, "For conspicuous gallantry in action against enemy armor, Lieutenant Gorman, upon discovering his tank's main armament inoperative and facing imminent destruction by superior enemy forces, deliberately rammed an enemy Tiger II tank, disabling it. He then secured alternative armament and returned to ensure the enemy tank's complete destruction. His action directly saved multiple Allied lives and demonstrated initiative of the highest order." Gorman was also awarded the French Croix de Guerre, though that's another story involving a different battle and equally remarkable courage. Guardsman Hugh Agnew, who'd accidentally saluted the German tank crew, received no medal but became a legend in the Irish Guards. For the rest of his life, whenever someone questioned his courage, he'd reply, "I've shaken hands with Jerry tankers in the middle of a battle. What have you done?" The Germans never forgot either. Soviet forces captured German training documents in 1945 that included new sections on defending against ramming attacks. Post-war interviews with surviving German tankers revealed that the fear of being rammed became pervasive. Panther commander Gustav Schrodeck told British interrogators, "After Cagney, we worried about Shermans charging us as much as we worried about their guns. You can't kill what's already committed to dying. That's what your Lieutenant Gorman taught us." This channel exists to preserve stories like these, acts of courage that shape the modern world. If this story moved you, please like this video and share it with someone who appreciates real history. And check out our video on Lafayette Poole, the American tank ace who developed his own unorthodox tactics against German armor. Link in the description. Now, let's see what happened to John Gorman after the war. John Gorman never sought fame for his action at Caney. After the war, he rarely spoke about it. When pressed by reporters or historians, he'd deflect. "I was in the wrong place at the wrong time with a broken gun. What would you have done?" It wasn't false modesty. Gorman genuinely believed any tanker in his position would have made the same choice. "The thing people forget," he told an Irish Guards reunion in 1984, "is that Barron was driving. I gave the order, but he executed it perfectly, and Skill kept his head enough to fire that useless gun, which bought us precious seconds. And Agnew, well, Agnew saluted the Germans, which I still don't understand, but it was so bizarre they didn't shoot him. Courage isn't individual, it's collective. He served in the Irish Guards until 1946, reaching the rank of captain. Then he did something unexpected. He joined the Royal Ulster Constabulary, serving as a district inspector until 1969. He worked as chief of security for BOAC, British Overseas Airways Corporation, from 1960-1963. Later, he entered Northern Ireland politics, serving as an Ulster Unionist Party member of the Northern Ireland Assembly. A Catholic Unionist in a divided Northern Ireland, Gorman was as unconventional in politics as he'd been in armored warfare. He believed in reconciliation and rejected sectarianism from both sides. Some called him a traitor to his faith. Others called him a bridge builder. He called himself Irish and British, with no contradiction. In 1994, 50 years after Cannae, Gorman attended a German-British tank veterans reunion in Normandy. Rudolf von Ribbentrop, the German officer who'd written that bitter after-action report, was there. The two men shook hands. "You ruined my perfect record," Ribbentrop said through a translator. "We'd never lost a Tiger II before." "You had perfect armor," Gorman replied. "I had perfect desperation." They laughed and drank together. Old soldiers remembering battles that seemed like ancient history to the young people walking the Normandy beaches. But ramming tactics, still relevant, still taught, still controversial. Modern tank warfare doctrine includes contact attacks, using the vehicle itself as a weapon when ammunition is exhausted or systems fail. The U.S. Army's FM 320.15 Tank Platoon Manual includes sections on vehicle as weapon last resort tactics. Israeli Merkava tanks in the 1982 Lebanon War used ramming to clear barricades when guns were masked by terrain. In 2003, a U.S. M1 Abrams in Iraq deliberately rammed a T-72 after sustaining main gun damage, crushing the enemy tank's turret ring. A training officer at Fort Moore told me, "Lieutenant Gorman proved that 60 tons of metal moving at 25 miles per hour is a weapon by itself. It's a last resort. But when you're out of options, mass times velocity beats armor thickness every time." John Gorman died on May 26, 2014, at age 91, in Killyleagh, Northern Ireland. His obituaries mentioned his political career and his police service. The Times of London devoted 3 paragraphs to his tank action at Cannae, but his former crew members, the surviving ones, knew what mattered. Lance Corporal James Barron, reached by phone before his own death in 2009, said it simply, "John gave the craziest order I ever received, and because we trusted him enough to execute it, we lived. That's leadership." At Gorman's funeral, a delegation from the Irish Guards attended in full-dress uniform. No speeches, no grand tributes, just a quiet salute to a man who'd done the impossible because the possible wasn't enough. His legacy? Every time an armored crew faces impossible odds and chooses to fight anyway. Every time desperation becomes a tactic. Every time someone looks at a superior enemy and says, "I'm faster, let's see if they can take a hit." The lesson isn't about ramming tanks. The lesson is about refusing to accept defeat when your enemy expects you to surrender. It's about turning your weakness, inferior armor, inferior guns, into strength through sheer audacity. It's about understanding that sometimes the most effective weapon isn't the one in your turret. It's the one in your chest. The Germans had better tanks, but John Gorman had something they couldn't armor plate against: the willingness to do what they thought was impossible. And that, ultimately, is why the Allies won.